Welcome to The Detail. I am your host, Cathy Antunes, and you are listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, and WBPV 100.1 LPFM in Bradenton, Florida. The views and opinions expressed by hosts, guests, and callers on WSLR programs are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of WSLR, its staff, or volunteers. And programming at WSLR is supported by listeners like you and by Ringling College Galleries and Exhibitions. Ringling College's 2024-25 exhibition season features art from Ringling students, alumni, faculty, and nationally recognized artists from a wide range of mediums and from diverse backgrounds. More information is available at ringlingcollege.gallery. Well, if you've been the CEO of Procter and Gamble and you've been involved in redeveloping the Cincinnati City Center, what do you do next? My guest is A.G. Laffley, and Mr. Laffley is assisting you, or the founding CEO of the Bay, which is the planning effort to transform 53 acres of city-owned land on Sarasota Bay into a signature public park. Today, Mr. Laffley leads the team that designs, develops, manages, and operates and programs the park known as the Bay. So, A.G. Laffley, thank you so much for joining me.
It's great to be here, Cathy. Good morning.
And I have to say, I have a sister and a niece who went to Hamilton College, and they will not be happy with me if I don't also mention that you are an alumnus of Hamilton, their beloved alma mater, right?
I'm very happy about that. It's a quiet little liberal arts college in upstate New York, as they know, and
Yes.
somehow, some way, I got a pretty good, decent education there.
AJ, when did you move here?
I actually, well, that's an interesting question. Okay, we first started coming here in 1998 as a family. That was vacations. We
Mhm.
bought our first condominium here on Longboat Key in 2004. I was still working, so we were, some form of part-time visitors.
Mhm.
And then we bought our current apartment and condo in 2008. And I've been a full-time resident of Florida since 2009 and Sarasota.
Okay. And for our listeners, there will be an opportunity to look at this on YouTube, and there's a lot of graphics I'll be sharing. So you may want to do that. I remember, I'm going to just share this screen of an aerial view of the Van Wezel, the whole area that's slated to become the Bay Park. It doesn't make sense for prime waterfront to be a parking lot, right? It's the classic paved paradise and put up a parking lot. So this was discussed. The first meetings were in 2014. Did you initiate those meetings, or were you simply attending at that time?
No, actually, neither. I'd been called back for a second tour at P&G, and I was commuting back and forth between Sarasota and Cincinnati. Diana Shaheen was going to those meetings and listening to some of the community get-togethers. They were actually convened by a neighborhood coalition called Bayfront 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with many of those involved with that coalition: Virginia Haley, Michael Clauber, John Thaxton, Drayton Saunders, Sean Merriman. I'm probably leaving others out, which I don't mean to. But what was great about that, I believe, is that it was a community and neighborhood coalition led dialogue, which resulted in a proposal to the city commission, I believe in 2015, to adopt guiding principles and to eventually move ahead with what they called a planning committee to propose a master plan for the site that you're showing. The one other comment I would make,
Yeah.
Cathy, regarding the site is, if you go back and look at the site, look at photos from the 1930s and 1940s, actually about half of the site was under the bay. So half of this site is fill. In fact, The entire area where the Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall is fill. About half of the lawns in the current park were fill. And I think that's important to keep in mind as we talk later about resiliency and environmental restoration.
Okay.
And I guess the other thing I would say, and this just gives you a little bit of insight into me, a lot of people looked at this and said, wow, we have a big problem. And I kind of looked at it and said, okay, yes, we have a problem, but it's also a huge opportunity. It's 53 acres
Yeah.
on Sarasota Bay, entirely owned by the city, that can be transformed into a public park for the benefit of everyone in our community.
Yeah. And that, I show the parking lots first and let me just do it quickly one more time, just to show how massive that parking lot is. And it is waterfront. This is an area, it is it the highest and best use, right? The real estate phrase for this
Yeah,
land to be waterfront, and clearly it doesn't seem to be at all. So I know everybody was and continues to be excited about seeing this land become a real park.
challenge here was not just that 2/3 of the site was impermeable
Yeah.
surface parking.
Yeah.
There were several other buildings on the site that were abandoned and deteriorating. It isn't just the opportunity side, to create a public park for all. It's also, frankly, the whole coastal resiliency challenge that we've become much more aware of with all the hurricanes of the last year and the past 3 years. It's the resiliency challenge. It's the stormwater treatment and water quality challenge. So when you really look at the site and you think about the problems it creates, as I said before, it also creates a lot of opportunities for us to make the site more resilient, more environmentally responsible, more environmentally sustainable, and in addition, a great public park with a whole bunch of amenities and features that meet the needs and wants of our community.
Yeah, I'm going to share the master plan. So this was the first master plan that was developed in 2018. And at that time, still, I believe it was called Bayfront 2020. But you can see that smack in the middle, you've got both the Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall is in the lower right corner. It's the purple piece in the lower right corner. And then the big purple structures in the middle, I'm not sure. One is another performing arts hall, and I guess the one on the right might be an amphitheater or shade structure. So things have changed, right? I mean, but this rendering got everybody really excited. So
Yes, I mean, this was the output of the Sarasota Bayfront Planning Organization, which was the successor to Bayfront 2020. We were a group of 9 citizens and the then city manager, Tom Barwin. We worked together beginning in October or November 2016 through September of 2018 when we brought this conceptual master plan to the city, and the city approved it unanimously. So that was sort of what kicked off the actual work. You're right, Cathy, a lot has changed since then. The fixtures, I would say, are Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall, still there, going strong. All of the architecturally significant, culturally important, and historically recognized buildings that line North Tamiami Trail and kind of the top part of your picture, from
yeah,
the
right on.
Sarasota Garden Club to the Blue Pagoda to the former Chidsey Library, the Art Center, the Municipal Auditorium, etc. And then the bayou on the right-hand side and the mangroves, both of which were unattended to at this time in 2018. And this very important public boat basin and launch area in what's currently called Centennial Park. So the kind of the left-hand
The left.
piece of your conceptual drawings. So those were kind of the fixtures, those and the roadways, right? The land and the water. And that's what we began to think about. how we can improve in ways that are good for the community and frankly the community of users that comes to the site and uses it in so many different ways.
Yeah. So phase one, when was phase one completed?
Phase one was completed just in time, late September, early October 2022. And we had a grand opening in the second half of October 2022. I believe this is an aerial photo from
Yeah.
one of those events. Yes, that was a concert on Sunday, I believe. But yeah, that's when we opened. And you may recall that time we were threatened by Hurricane Ian, which showed up on our doorstep in September, the month before we were supposed to open. So we were scrambling around cleaning up the mess that Ian made and putting the finishing touches on the park so guests could come and see the newest public park in Sarasota. And 50,000 of them showed up in that first month, which was absolutely amazing. I mean, way beyond what we expected.
Yeah, it is. It's very impressive. All the events, if you go to the website and if you haven't done it, it's very impressive how many things are going on there and how beautifully integrated the natural environment is with the structures. AG, I'm always curious, just a project like this requires a lot of financing and organization. And in an ongoing way, but for phase one, what was the public piece? What was the private piece? And what does that look like?
Okay, on the funding side, Kathy.
Yeah, fun.
Okay, through phase one, we invested, the we being the city, the county, and the community, about $31 million in the capital improvement that is the current park.
Hmm.
And $27 million of that came from private sources. It came from the major foundations in the area. The five major foundations joined us from the beginning, and that was absolutely crucial. So the Patterson Foundation, the Barancik Foundation, the William and Marie Selby Foundation, and both of the community foundations, Community Foundation of Sarasota County and Gulf Coast Community Foundation. And of course, we had a number of philanthropists that supported us. And up to today, we have something like 2,300 friends of the park, and we have over 100 business partners that support us. So the main point is, through the first phase, it was mostly funded by private money.
That's
Through
impressive.
it is impressive. Actually, it's a little bit better than we thought, a lot better than we thought we could do initially. But I think it was incredibly important that the private money stepped up and it came from so many different sources, from friends giving us $25, right?
Yeah.
To foundations giving us millions of dollars, right?
Mhm.
The second phase will be funded principally from government sources. And the second phase, which we have designed and we are in planning or construction on, is a $65 million set of projects, actually four projects. And $48 million of that $65 million will be funded from a tax increment finance district backed city bond, which was issued in the spring of 2023. And the balance, which is $17 million, will be funded from a mix of private sources and specific government grants that we get for some of the project work. A couple of quick examples. We got a $500,000 grant from the State Historical Preservation Agency to rehabilitate the former Chidsey Library. We got a couple of grants from the Department of the Environment at the state level to redo coastal resilience and build a much more sustainable, resilient shoreline. So more government money in phase two, still private money in phase two, more government grants in phase two. And when we're done, we'll have spent 95 to $100 million on more than half of the park that we will eventually build. And about half of that will come from private money and about half from government money.
Okay. So the next phase is phase two. And it's very different. You've got a resilient shoreline piece, you've got the canal district, and you've got the cultural district. I know you said there were four projects, but you're waiting on Sunset Pier. Is that the fourth one?
We are waiting on Sunset Pier, and we've enhanced as we recommended and received approval from the Bay Park Improvement Board, the city and the county. We've enhanced what we're doing in the cultural district and what we're doing in the canal district. So
Okay.
let me wind back because I want to put a pin in your funding question.
Sure.
What I reported on was what we're spending on capital improvements, capital development of the park. We've also been spending $1 million to $2 million plus a year on management, operations, programming, maintenance, et cetera. And
Mm.
virtually all of that comes from private funding. The city gives us a couple $100,000 a year for some of the maintenance, but most of that comes from private money. And that's how you get to, by
Wow.
the time we finish phase two, half from public, half from private.
Okay. Because I think, again, very impressive. I had a friend of mine, it's actually another programmer at WSLR, Carlos Pagan, who worked in public television, lived in Miami. The name of the Miami project escapes me, but it was a very ambitious public park. And unfortunately, they didn't really plan for its operation and maintenance. And so it failed. And what you're telling me, that was always my concern in the beginning because it's easy to, well, it's not easy, but everybody gets excited about building something. But if you can't maintain it, there's no point. So what is that the conservancy role? Is that what's happening with a lot of the private money? Is that it's going to maintain the park?
You are on an incredibly important point, not just for civic projects like public parks or civic spaces, but also, frankly, for a lot of arts and cultural building. Everybody's enthusiastic. It's a little bit easier to raise money for the capital project.
Right.
And then at the end of that money raising period, people look around and they go, oh my goodness, do we have enough to operate and maintain and program what
Hmm.
we've built? And the answer is we do plan ahead. We've been very attentive to that issue. Some of the things that we do, we have quietly built an endowment of over $10 million. That endowment, of course, is available at the board and in some cases my discretion to be used for park maintenance, park operations. We've built $5.5 million in cost reserves, 2 million for maintenance of all of the buildings that we manage, 2 million for maintenance of the grounds and landscaping, 1 million for programming. Some of our capital gifts, we set aside 20% for maintenance. So we got a very generous capital gift to build the IBIS playground in phase one. We set aside 20% of that gift for maintenance. We got a very generous gift from the Bransick Foundation to transform the bayou and the mangrove. We set aside funds for maintenance. So we try very hard to
That,
plan
I
for
mean,
the future.
that's actually very exciting to me to hear. And I know a lot of these are like the bean counter aspects that a lot of people don't think about. But I'm like, oh my gosh, because I've done development for a nonprofit and for a couple of them. And a lot of the time, people are very much wanting their gift to go to something specific. Like I want to fund a camera to take care of, or, a media room for this purpose. But then the roof is leaking. And where's the money to fix the roof? So I think it's phenomenal that you're just taking a piece of these gifts and earmarking that for maintenance from the beginning, you know?
It's incredibly important.
Yeah,
The earmarking for operations and maintenance, and you mentioned earlier, we invest in programming because an activated public space, an activated public park is a park that is really one park for all that really serves the community. And yes, we're well designed. Yes, we're well built. Thank you, John Swift Construction and Haskell Construction. And yes, we're well operated and maintained, but our programming does distinguish it, and it has to be funded.
And an activated park is a safe park.
Very true.
When people are there, then you're not going to get these situations where, you have crime.
Yep, that's
Um,
very true.
yeah.
The dog walkers, walkers, and joggers start at sunup every morning. And then there's another group of walkers that finish after sunset before the park closes every evening.
Mhm.
And having activities every day throughout the day is incredibly important frankly, to a clean, well-maintained, and safe park, and that matters. To your question about phase two, um, your diagram is dead right. Conceptually, we are working in three areas. The cultural district is, think about it, that's our front of the park that runs along North Tamiami Trail from Boulevard of the Arts to 10th Street. That involves tree lining, landscaping, a promenade like we have along Boulevard of the Art, and all new landscaping up to the buildings that are there, from the municipal auditorium down to the garden club. And we've slowly but surely begun to rehabilitate, renovate, and repurpose every one of those, as I said, culturally and historically significant pieces of architecture that are really a gift to the city and a gift to the community.
Mhm.
And the city is in the process of, in addition to the partnership agreement and the implementation agreement for the park, finalizing a facility management agreement for us to manage those city-owned buildings on their behalf. So we're in the middle of that. We're almost done. We've done two of the renovations. We've done the garden club and the Chidsey Library, which will be open to the public in October during
And
our third anniversary event.
AG, what kind of a library is that? Is it a
Okay, yeah,
specific
yeah, great question. One of the great things about my job is I get to learn a lot about Sarasota history from a lot of different sources. I'm operating from memory, so you can double check, but I think the original library in Sarasota was in one of the homes. It might have been Marie Selby's home, but it was actually in a home. The first library that was in a separate public library building was the one that opened in the former Chidsey Library building, which we've just rehabilitated. It was designed by a couple of Chicago architects, the Martins, and it opened in 1941, before World War II. And it was the public library until the Selby Library was built on the site in the 70s, which was the public library until the current library was built downtown across from Five Points.
Yeah.
So it's a library from an historical standpoint, not a library from a recent use standpoint. Frankly, the building's been abandoned for some time. It was structurally impaired and unsafe. And the first thing we had to do was determine, with a lot of help from Karen's, who's our
Okay.
engineering partner locally, we had to figure out whether we could make the building structurally sound and safe enough to make the investment in rehabilitation and repurposing. We determined we could. We determined we could do the entire project more effectively and efficiently than building a new building. And that's what we've done. And so it's going to become our operations center, the Bay Park Conservancy's offices. There'll be a conference room there. There's a community reception area in the front, and we'll unveil all of that to the public, as I said, in the third anniversary event in October. It'll be fun.
Oh,
Once we get all the construction done out front, we can
that
we
sounds
can go
great.
back in the front doors, and so can the public.
I want to go back to safety for a minute
Yes. Okay.
because, an activated park makes it a safe park. But the other piece that I think, and certainly, and like I totally understand, I have shows about this. People are concerned about the height of buildings going up in Sarasota and how that can change the feeling of a community. But what's really nice is that those residential buildings that are going to be on the southern end of the park across the street where the Hyatt is changing. Those are eyes on the street. Those are residents who are going to be looking down at the park. And again, it provides safety when you have that kind of public, people looking at the park.
Again, you're on a super important point. It's a layer of activities and design and operations that build safety into the experience when you come to the park. People in the park matter all day long, all week long.
Mhm.
The park is designed so we have view corridors, and we can see. It's designed very purposely so that you can see. The walkways are wider and well lighted. We're the only public venue in the county or the city that has security cameras. We invested
Really?
over $150,000 in security cameras.
Mhm.
We coordinate with Sarasota Police Department. I don't want to go into these details because,
No, and I'm not really.
but they have actually
Yeah.
apprehended people who have unfortunately committed vandalism or
Hmm.
theft from construction vehicles as a result of our cameras and our eyes on the park. You're absolutely right. When we're done, we're sort of going to be configured like Central Park in New York, except instead of high
Hmm.
rises all the way around the Bay Park, we'll have high rises around three-quarters of it, and we'll have the bay, on the other side. Today, there are 2,000 residents when they are in residence living in all of those apartments, condominiums, and the Sarasota Bay Club around the park. When all the construction's done, there'll be over 3,000 residents living around the park, and that is 3,000 residents. And I guess the last thing I would say, and we learned a lot more about this during the hurricanes, and it helped us, but some of these buildings, like Condo on the Bay, like BOCL, like the Hyatt, have their own camera security systems. So we can tap
Yeah.
into their security systems and we can tap into ours.
Mhm.
And it was super important because we could see what the hurricanes, especially Helene and Milton, were doing to the park in real time. And it enabled us the day after Milton left to be out in the park and to be cleaning up right away and to mobilize volunteers and the teams so we could keep the park open and clean it up as efficiently as possible. And frankly, make it safe so people could come out and have a place of refuge and respite after those hurricanes.
We've touched on this resilient shoreline. You've been talking about hurricanes. That's one important aspect of phase two. So how about we talk about that resilient shoreline piece? The initial schematic for, that 2018 master plan, the shoreline has changed. And I think environmentally, it looks like it's changed for the better.
Yes, this is a really important piece of the total design and evolving design and build out of the park. We've spent a lot of time with national, state, regional, and local experts in this whole area of climate, environment, coastal resilience, stormwater management, and water quality. And we have a rather large network that we've been learning from, and we have environmental engineers and civil engineers, of course, on our team. And the first big decision we made, Cathy, was to significantly broaden or widen the resilient shoreline wherever we could. So one observation from the storms that hit us last year was that the native natural shoreline along the park that's open survived a lot better than the built shorelines at Bayfront Park south of us and north of us, north of Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall, which took a lot of damage. Okay. So one great thing about a bayou and a mangrove and breakwaters and riprap and sand and plantings that can move and can flood and recover is that they can recover. They're resilient, right? So we made it much wider. We designed it so it has very few built structures. We are not going to build shoreline shade structures like the one in this artist's conception.
Okay.
It's all going to be native, natural Florida plantings. The plantings are going to be proven in coastal areas that get a lot of sun, a lot of humidity, a lot of flooding, a lot of salt water. We're going to build what are called, I call them ponds, but they're, they serve as water areas that can fill up when we have a storm surge, and that can filter water when we have stormwater treatment that's running from east of the park, off of North Tamiami Trail, off of that parking lot into the bay. So they're part of our stormwater management and water quality system that moves west, and they're part of our resiliency that moves to the east. In fact, one simple way to think about it, and this may be an oversimplification, if we get this right, this resilient shoreline will help protect the community and the land from the water, from storm surges and flooding, and it will help protect the bay, our seagrass, our sea bottom coral, our marine life from the runoff from the land that's polluted. And I think now, in the park that's open, we treat 70 million gallons of polluted runoff. And when we're done with this resilient shoreline and a number of other stormwater treatment methods and structures that we'll build into the balance of the park, we'll treat over 300 million gallons of stormwater. We'll treat every bit of stormwater and runoff that goes through this 53 acres, which is obviously great for Sarasota Bay, great for seagrass, great for those of us, and I'm not one anymore, I only kayak, but those of us who are boat, who go out on the water, who fish. So it's an interesting ecosystem. We've worked closely with a lot of different players, as I said, and we coordinate closely with the city and the county. But when we're done, we should have a much more resilient park.
So I have a follow-up question. And actually this was from somebody who posted on social media, and it resonates with me. I'm fortunate to live on the bay. I would not want to swim in it. It never looks to me all that inviting, you know. I just wonder if it's clean enough. And we do have water quality warnings, which have been unfortunately concerning, and times when we've been told don't go swimming on our beaches. So the question was, and this was asking about children who are playing there and near the water, playing at the water. Is there any plan? Because another concern people have is that actually they don't think they're being told often enough about water quality readings. And I realize this may not be actually entirely in your wheelhouse when it comes to this involves other agencies. But will there be postings about water quality, whether or not you should go in the water? Are there areas where people kind of lay out, sunbathe, and go swimming, or no?
Okay, that's a good question, and there are a lot of sub questions there. Here's the latest that I'm aware of, and it's a few weeks ago, but there is a proposal working its way through the city, and I believe maybe working its way through the county to address these important issues that you're raising.
Okay.
I think the first and most important one is who is responsible for testing the water, in the bay. And frankly, I may be off a little bit, but I believe about a third of the city of Sarasota is actually water. If you count all the bayous, all of the coastal creeks, all, yeah. So that's the first step, is to make sure that the government agencies in this case are coordinated and are officially responsible for testing water on a periodic basis, and especially after storms. Okay. We do work with the private nonprofit groups that do test the water, and they provide input, but again, they test in certain places and they provide input to the city and the county. I guess the second point I would make is you asked about behavior. We're not a swimming site,
Okay.
okay? And we were never intended to be
Okay.
a swimming site. In fact, we had long discussions about some people like to call the natural resilient shoreline area down by the sunset deck and the oolite wall and the breakwater a beach
Right.
because
Yeah.
there's natural native sand there, but it's not intended to be a swimming beach. We
Beach
do
there.
observe people who do wade in it. I honestly have never seen anybody swim there.
Okay.
I have seen people who I assume are training for things like triathlons swim in the bay offshore, but most of them tend to go to Lido or Siesta. But every now and then you'll see somebody swimming 20, 30, 40, 50 yards offshore, or
Yeah.
you'll see somebody who's taken their boat out from
So,
either a public boat launch or one of the keys and people are swimming off their boat. But
yeah.
I think the important point here in the citizens' question is we need more coordination between the two governments responsible for
Yeah.
waterfront activity, which is are the county of Sarasota and the city of Sarasota, and we need communication to everyone. So citizens, the community, and frankly, not just our park. There are a whole bunch of other parks and boat launches and other areas, Selby Gardens, that front the bay. And we were all operating with incomplete and imperfect and uncoordinated information after the last round of hurricanes.
That last year was a big wake up call, I think, in a lot of ways. Everybody, if you're just joining us, my guest is A.G. Laffley. We are talking about the Bay, and A.G. Laffley is the former CEO at Procter and Gamble, who has been involved in many public-private partnerships in Cincinnati and is bringing that expertise here to Sarasota in planning and managing the improvements to this 53-acre site, which will become a complete public park. So there's four things I want to get to, and we've got like 15 to 20 minutes. TIF funding, parking, and the other two pieces, the cultural district and the canal district. So how about we go TIF funding, because people hear tax increment financing. What is that, AG, and how is it funding the Bay?
Okay. Tax increment financing is a common method and tool that cities and counties use to fund major civic initiatives like a public park, like a new performing arts center, like a new city square, in a way that they don't have to draw on current tax revenue. And what they do is they define a tax increment district that surrounds the improvement. So in this case, the neighborhood that surrounds the 53 acre, actually 42 acre park plus 11 acre Centennial Park when it's done. And they set aside the increment, if there is one, in tax increases driven by mostly appreciation of land, commercial, or residential properties, or new developments in the district. They set aside those increments for a certain number of years into the future. They put them in a trust fund called the Tax Increment Financed Trust Fund. And that money can be used to either directly fund the improvements or back a bond that the government entity may choose to issue so they can build sooner, build faster,
Right.
whatever.
Which is
Um,
which is what the city is doing for phase two, right?
exactly, exactly. So
And I,
I think the kind of questions we get, first of all, I do encourage people to watch the video. We do know from a whole bunch of surveys and qualitative feedback that if you do watch the video that's available on the website, you do come away with a better understanding of tax increment financing. You know, the first thing it is taxpayer money for sure, but taxpayer money. It's the increment in what the taxpayer pays from a base date moving forward, in this case, 29 years. The city and the county set a base year of 2019, and then every increment in taxes received over and above the amount received from the district in 2019 is set aside.
The way I look at it, it is a way to harness the value created by the park because we know that a park like Central Park, that the properties clustered around Central Park have more value because of the park. So it is a way to, and for people who are buying when the park is not yet complete, they can have that confidence that there is a funding source, that it is going to happen. And it feeds on itself. It creates value in the community and a funding stream that's backed by the thing that you're building, right? The park that you're
Yes. No, you're exactly right. If a tax increment financing works, it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the city and the county or the government entity because they don't have to dip into operating budgets funded by tax revenues that they need to run the infrastructure and all the projects that are ongoing.
Mhm.
It's a win for the residents, commercial and residential, because if the project is successful, their property values increase, and that's what's happened here. In fact, if you look at a lot of the advertising and promotional materials for a lot of the apartment and condo residences, they prominently feature the park that exists and the park that will be built. And thirdly, as you pointed out, it obviously helps the park because we can develop and build sooner than we would be able to if we had to raise all the money up front. I'm glad we raised all the money up front, mostly from private sources for the park that's open now, because we demonstrated we could do it, and that was important. But if we had to build the rest of the park that way, it would take 2 or 3 times as long to complete the park.
Okay.
And it would ultimately cost more, right, Cathy? Because we'd be paying more inflation as we go, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's a very smart funding system. It draws on the value that's being created and it makes sense. I like it, but I don't think most people know what it is. So I really appreciate you going through that. Now, so you've got the Canal District, which is near the boat ramp, right? Where that canal is at 10th Street. But you've got the cultural district, which is, the garden club, all these buildings, municipal auditorium, the art center. The site of a future performing arts center has been all over the map. I think in the beginning, back in 2014, it seemed like it was all part of the same project. But actually, these are really two distinct efforts. There's the effort to create a new performing arts center, which has become controversial. But then there's the park, which there's no, like everybody wants the park. So when I look at the cultural district, so you can see that there's that future performing arts center in that schematic. But then there's also a 2024 master plan. And I don't think this came from your organization, but that master plan shows performing arts buildings in a different location, 3 buildings by the canal. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to, and maybe you don't know, how is that intersection between the park effort and then where to site a new performing arts hall?
Okay, Cathy, let me try to be helpful here. First of all, you're exactly right. The city has chosen to manage, I would say, 4 efforts separately. So they work with us. They have a partnership with us, meaning the Bay Park Conservancy, and our primary focus is park, right? So
Right.
manage, operate, program, and maintain the park that's open, design, develop, and build out more park for all. And when that's built, we manage that. The second effort the city has commissioned and is about to complete its work is the Van Wezel Purple Ribbon Committee. That committee has been at their work for the better part of 2 years. They just issued a report that was posted online. I believe they're going in front of the city commission to discuss their recommendations later this month. Okay. And that's important because Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall is our performing arts center and has been the city's and the community's performing arts center since it was built in 1968-69 and opened in 1970. The third effort is the city has a partnership with the Sarasota Performing Arts Foundation, and they have a contract with Renzo Piano Building Workshop, architects out of Genoa, Italy, to explore a concept and design for a new performing arts center to be located somewhere in the park. And then lastly, while we're going to do the design plan, development, and build out of the improved resilient shoreline and public boat launch area, the city actually manages their public boat launch areas, okay, Centennial Park. So let me come back to your direct question. The first conceptual design you showed was strictly a place maker. We had no idea
Right.
where a new performing arts center would end up going. We put it in that location because that's relatively higher ground. I believe the elevation there is 12 to 16 feet, and we knew a new performing arts center ought to be situated on higher ground because one of the disadvantages of Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall, it's only 5 or 6 feet above bay level, and that's why it took so much damage
Yeah.
from Helene and Milton. This design that and plan that you're showing was Renzo Piano's and the Sarasota Performing Arts Foundation's original presentation, I believe, last summer to the public. I mean, I went to a couple of the community and public meetings to learn more about it.
Yeah.
And I believe, based on the city meetings of this spring, that now the Sarasota Performing Arts Foundation, the city, and Renzo Piano are looking at locations for a new performing arts center that will be south of the public boat launch basin. So on your diagram to the
Okay.
right of the boat launch area. I also believe they're looking at one or two buildings, but again, you would have to check with them, not four, okay, in the first phase. And they are considering a whole host um, of subjects, several of which were raised at the last city commission meeting, which was a day long. I believe there's another commission meeting set up to go through this in August or September, but again, you'll have to check with
Yeah.
Sarasota Performing Arts Foundation in the city. But long-winded way of saying they're still working on finding the best location and the best concept design configuration for the first installment of a new performing arts center.
Yeah.
And I think that both the Purple Ribbon Committee and the city and the Sarasota Performing Arts Foundation are all coming to the conclusion that eventually, and eventually is 5 to 10 years, not 20, 30, or 40 years, Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall is going to have outlived its functional, useful, safe life as a performing arts center, and the community is going to need to at least look at an alternative.
Yeah. Because I've heard different things, and actually that there was an engineering report that wasn't given to the city commission when they were doing the partnership agreement, which it should have been, but that the Van Wezel actually does have a lot of useful life, more than 10 years, and can be waterproofed. And you get the most value out of an asset at the back end when you're really using it, to its full potential. So it just concerns me. I know it concerns a lot of people that the site for this moves around a bunch. And I'm not really, I mean, I know it's a work in progress, but why would we put a new building close to the water? Even if we can do it, it does seem like there's other places. But because we just don't have a lot of time left, can you tell me about parking? And I'm showing the Canal District. You're going to have a a restaurant here and day docks, which sounds wonderful. Can you speak to that? But also, where's the parking going to go? Because I know a lot of people care.
Yes. No, it's a great question. Just a quick comment. I mean, you're on the key question regarding Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall and any new performing arts hall. It's how long can Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall continue to deliver what the community needs and wants in a performing arts hall safely, effectively, and efficiently? And when will the city and need to make a decision about a new hall and where would that be located? So I think that's dead right. Regarding parking, if you put up that last photo, I can speak to the parking, but the short answer is that we believe we have to provide, and we are recommending a series of options to the city to provide parking that is at least equivalent, not necessarily equal, but equivalent to what's provided in the surface parking lots today.
Mhm.
But to provide it in a way that enables more resilient, more environmentally responsible, and frankly, more usable park space. So in the middle of the park, which you can see all green space where the surface parking lot is today,
Yeah.
our recommendation is to build a combination garage and parking under park. The garage
Honestly,
would be situated along
yeah.
Van Wezel Way,
Uh-huh.
and it would be 2, 3, or 4 levels. And then under most of that park area, we can put another full level of parking.
AG, that makes so much sense from the very beginning. And I know it's expensive, but put the parking underground, elevate the park. You
Yeah.
know, you've got storm surge. No one's going to park in that parking lot when a storm's coming, you know?
No, and there are, I mean, again, we're checking this 5 different ways with different engineering groups, local, regional, and national, and people that build sophisticated parking garages like this, underground, on ground, under park. But it wouldn't be underground because you can't go underground.
Well,
It would be built at about the same elevation, maybe a bit higher than the current surface parking. So would it flood occasionally? But if it floods, it would drain easily.
mhm,
But yes, that's the way to go. And yes, it will cost a little bit more.
mhm.
Secondly, we are right now looking at ways to provide additional parking for boat trailers, boat trucks, and boat vehicles in the Centennial Park area. We believe we can do that. We believe we can expand the parking and expand the launch capacity, which is what the boating community needs there. So if you step way back, on the site, we believe we can provide the parking that will be needed for the major users of the site, park guests, Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall for the foreseeable future, the boating community. And I guess the last thing I would say, I know that the city is pursuing a number of options to increase parking in the Rosemary District, which is short of parking. And we have, as you may recall, an overpass provided across North Tamiami Trail at about 9th Street to connect the Rosemary District and downtown to the park via a pedestrian bicycle crossover. So any additional parking garage or parking space that they build in the Rosemary would be able to be used during the day by Rosemary patrons of businesses and that exists there. And then in the evening, people could park there and they'd be within a half a mile of the park and the
Well,
current Performing Arts Center.
we have to leave it there. AG Laffley, thank you so much for joining me. I think the takeaway for me is it is really encouraging, and I think the community can have a lot of confidence because that this park is well planned, well funded, and there are plans for its maintenance. I've listened to a lot of proposals over the years. It's very encouraging to hear how well thought out and how much community buy-in there is. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I know everyone appreciates it.
Thank you, Kathy. You know it's a team effort, and there are a lot of people that we should thank who are not able to join us today. But thank you very much. And last but not least, the community interaction, the community engagement, the community dialogue, the community debate and discussion are all so important because that input makes us think more imaginatively, more creatively, more practically, all the ways we need to think so we can come up with a solution that meets the needs of the park guests.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone who's working on the Bay. Thank you, AG, for joining me and everybody. You've been listening to the detail on WSLR 96.5, LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, and WBPV 100.1. LPFM in Bradenton, Florida. Be sure to stay tuned for more public affairs programming here on WSLR. Make it a great day.